In the darkness, I knew I might not see the dawn, but the urgency to warn the world was unshakable. Sworn allegiance to the U.S. government, I served my time at a place they called Black Site 7. I'd keep my identity hidden. It wouldn't matter to you or this tale. Still, this path, this wasn't the life I'd envisioned. Once upon a time, right after those naive high school days, I'd signed up for the war in Iraq, lured by promises that were never kept. 8 long, scorching years under the desert sun. It wasn't just about dragging comrades out of the line of fire. The horrors I witnessed there were beyond comprehension. From grotesque camel spiders crawling on my skin in the pitch dark to the gruesome image of a friend's decapitation viewed through binoculars. Buildings, hiding enemies and innocents alike, reduced to mere ashes. When the dust settled and my duty was deemed done, they handed me my release and muttered their hollow gratitude. Home wasn't the haven I'd imagined. Others never even got the chance to return, yet my homecoming felt like a different kind of war. I was expected to slip seamlessly back into the mundanity of civilian life after being entrenched in warfare for so long. 2 out of the initial 3 months saw me confined in a rundown apartment, a result of nightmarish episodes my family couldn't bear to witness. The world outside, with its car horns and barking dogs, felt like an ambush waiting to happen. A sudden firecracker could send me scrambling for a weapon that wasn't there. In that bleak period, I had even toyed with the idea of ending it all. Until TJ, with his ever-present grin, showed up. "You're a mess, Hoss." But I got the answer. First, pancakes. TJ, our fearless leader from the days in the desert, was a paradox in the face of chaos. Always smiling, always cracking jokes amidst hell on earth. I often thought he was on the edge of sanity, but his laughter in the face of grimness was somewhat infectious. TJ wasn't his birth name. To protect him from the current turmoil, I'd rather not disclose more about him. Over breakfast at a busy Denny's, he revealed his new venture. "Hoss, you're spiraling," he said, syrup dripping from his fork. "But I've got something that'll anchor you." The mention of 2 trees caught my attention immediately. Publicly known for medical advances, but those in our line of work knew its darker side. Covert operations and silent eliminations were their real expertise. We crossed paths with them in Iraq. I recalled, "They're men." Eerie is putting it lightly. TG smirked, taking another bite of his pancake. "Welcome to my new kingdom, Black Site 7, he declared. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Should I be celebrating? I asked. He laughed. "Not many know, but this covered gem is lining my pockets pretty well. However, I need a reliable right hand, someone who knows the drill, comfortable with a gun, and seeking a sense of purpose. Ring any bells?" As much as I wanted to decline, the desperate need for a purpose tugged at me. Despite being home, stability eluded me. My shattered nerves and hyper-alertness made it impossible to settle. Maybe this was my shot at redemption. It's one thing being haunted by the ghosts of war, and entirely another being haunted by the phantom noises of the everyday. The echoing roar of a vehicle, or the distant slam of a door, had my heart pounding like a war drum. My jittery hands and paranoia weren't exactly qualities potential employers were scouting for. "I appreciate the sentiment," I began, voice tinged with doubt. "But in my state, I'm not sure I can handle anything, let alone a government gig." He chuckled softly, pulling a small metal tin into view. "Your medical records paint quite the picture, Hoss. Nightmares that are a little too real, an explosive temper, constant dread. Like a poster child for PTSD." He leaned forward. "Even that little incident with your parents." Eyes narrowing, I shot back. "How in hell did you find out about that?" "With my clearance? Everything's an open book." He smirked. Pushing the tin closer, he beckoned. "Open it. Think of it as the next chapter of your life." It looked sterile, innocuous. But something about that plain, metal box reeked of mystery. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but curiosity overpowered. I unlatched it. Inside, 2 unassuming gray pills lay side by side. These, he began dramatically, are your escape route. Twice daily, and you'll feel as if time reversed, taking you back to that fearless 18-year-old you once were. The traumas, the jitters, all gone. Just tranquility. His voice, smooth as silk, reminded me eerily of stories where deals were made with devils. All right, what's the hidden clause? He chuckled. These are exclusively 2 trees. Only on our payroll do you get access. Try them. One night. Then decide. That night, those pills sat like a challenge. With a shot of vodka, down they went. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Years of accumulated terror and tension just melted away. It was like awakening from a prolonged nightmare. The relief, the lightness, it was reminiscent of the time before that fateful day in 2003 when I'd first put on the uniform. The morning light saw me renewed, transformed. Without hesitation, I dialed TJ. I'm in, but what's in these things? Silence stretched over the line, thick and suffocating. Finally, he replied, trust me, Hoss, some doors are better left unopened. Get packed. Tomorrow, you head to West Virginia. By the time I arrived at Black Site 7, after a long 16-hour journey through dense woods and winding roads, exhaustion tugged at me. Though the pills kept the old ghosts at bay, I could feel the familiar tinge of unease returning. My dilapidated compact, heavily contrasting with the mysterious surroundings, seemed to echo my trepidation about what lay ahead. Driving behind that slow-moving truck was a test of my sanity. The anxiety crept in, wrapping its tendrils around my brain. Was this all a ruse? An elaborate charade to lead me to my end? However, spotting TJ, standing tall and imposing against the backdrop of what appeared to be a dilapidated military post, anchored me back to reality. He wore that maddening, all-knowing smirk. Without a word, he handed over another tin, this one gleaming under the muted sunlight. Without hesitation, I downed the 2 gray pills, feeling their familiar calming embrace. The world around seemed to slow down, taking a more discernible shape, and my paranoia started to ebb away. TJ guided me through my new home. It was surprisingly cozy. A bunk bed, a neat little kitchenette, lockers for apparel, and a footlocker for personal trinkets. Keep it tidy, Hoss, he admonished lightly. But it wasn't the quaint setup that piqued my curiosity. It was the isolated terminal, nestled in a corner, that caught my attention. Screens flashed with live footage, capturing every inch of the facility. He spoke softly. We're not just storing old memories here, Hoss. Night times, well, that's when things get a tad interesting. And you, my friend, are the guardian. Round the clock. Save for the occasional respite. This is your universe. Isolation was no stranger to me. The question was, what exactly was my role? What's my mission, TJ? He motioned to a trio of buildings on the screen. Keep intruders out. Lethal force. Green lit, but don't let curiosity get the better of you. Enter, and Black Site 8 becomes your next stop. His eyes, cold as ice, betrayed the warmth of his grin. Rest easy. Any movement. The alarms will blare. He detailed the weekly food deliveries, the monotony of military-ready meals, and the simple pleasures I could order to kill time. As we strolled, he suddenly said, "Your phone." I handed it over, watching as he pocketed it. In exchange, he handed me a new one. "Your car keys, too," he added. I hesitated briefly, but handed them over, realizing that this wasn't just a job. It was a complete life overhaul. A heavy set of rules followed. No venturing out, no spilling secrets, no rekindling old connections. After 5 years, I could reconsider my existence, my place in this secluded world. TG's punch on my arm was a reminder of his initial promise, a breezy 5 years. It was an uncanny prophecy. 5 years, immersed in games, movies, and solitude. The eerie woods surrounding Black Site became my haven. Those warehouses, veiled in mystery, remained untouched. My military discipline kicked in, staving off the tempting tendrils of curiosity. Alarms. They hardly blared. The first time they did, I recall the comical scene of me, in my nightwear, pistol in hand, sneaking up on an utterly bemused deer. That deer, darting away, probably had more tales to share about the bewildered guard of Black Site than I had about my tenure there. Amid the stillness of the woods, that encounter with the deer was oddly transformative for me. Those majestic creatures had always been distantly elusive, and this close encounter was a rare privilege. As it vanished into the thickets, relief washed over me. Gratefulness for not pulling the trigger, for preserving the creature's fleeting existence. However, the serenity of that evening was short-lived. The very third alarm was different. I was engrossed in the surreal world of superheroes, watching a cinematic Marvel saga, possibly Infinity Wars, when an ominous blare shattered the tranquility. Hitting pause, I prepared myself for another deer intrusion. But to my astonishment, a lone figure loomed on the screen. Equipped with a crowbar, he was on a stealth mission, trying to force his way inside. No vehicle heralded his arrival. He had melted out from the very woods that encapsulated my world. The sheer surprise of witnessing an unfamiliar face after months, especially after Agent Daughtry's brief visit, left a mix of apprehension and excitement in me. Every break I had taken in these woods had been in secluded company resorts, tailored to keep our secrets intact, even under the influence of one drink too many. The sight of this man, unaffiliated with the two trees, triggered a heightened sense of alertness in me. I slipped out, stealthily, with my pistol ready, the chilly air biting my face. But my stealth was betrayed by a brittle twig underfoot. His reaction was immediate. Swinging around, crowbar raised, our eyes locked. My training instinct kicked in. I didn't have time for a verbal confrontation. A single shot echoed, ending the impending threat. There he lay, eyes vacant, a chilly reminder of how swiftly life can turn. I promptly reached out to TJ, who was quick to arrive with other men in their crisply tailored suits. Their reaction was oddly comforting, assuring me that my action was necessary. When asked about the aftermath, TJ's confident smile surfaced again. Disposal, Haas, the kind that leaves no traces. As the cold air carried the scent of gasoline, I found my resolve, and together we watched the man's remains transform into a funeral pyre at the edge of the woods. After an extended respite, my return was marked by a change. TJ deemed me trustworthy, revealing more layers of the enigmatic Black Site. It wasn't long before another alarm resounded. Emerging from the shadows was TJ, stepping out of a sleek black car, a signal that beckoned me. I walked to him, the weight of my holstered gun a grim reminder of what had transpired. From the car emerged two men, presenting another man, hands tied, a black hood concealing his fears. My eyes flitted between TJ and the hooded figure, the question evident. Pulling me aside, TJ unraveled the secondary purpose of Black Site, executing assets. It was now my duty to end lives that the two trees deemed dispensable. I felt a surge of anger, the weight of lies heavy on my chest. Why was I kept in the dark? I'm no cold-blooded killer. TJ's retort dripped with irony, recalling the shadows of my past. Those you combated in Iraq might think differently. It's not the same. Iraq was a war, a battleground. This is sheer murder. TJ's reply was chilling. See this as another battleground. Haas. Here, we wage a war against enemies of public safety. The hooded man knelt, praying, amidst the ashes of the previous burn site. With a grave expression, TJ issued his orders. When defiance painted my face, the situation took an even darker turn. Guns pointed, choices diminished. The line between right and wrong became perilously thin. In a setting dominated by the looming darkness and haunted memories, there stood TJ's provocations. Come on, Haas, don't let sentiment cloud your judgment over some expendable entity. He's as inconsequential as that man outside the warehouse. Regrettably, the weight of my predicament led me to the act I had so vehemently detested. Steeling myself, I pulled the trigger, sending another life into oblivion, all while locking eyes with TJ, challenging him without words. TK, a master manipulator, tried to pacify the storm within me. You've made a prudent choice, Haas. In the grand scheme of things, you might have to endure this a mere dozen or so times over the next quartet of years. This became a harrowing monthly routine. Individuals clad in scrubs, lab coats, scientists, intellectuals, all met their fateful end at my hand. I had become the executioner for those who probably deviated from some arcane company code. Regardless of their age, gender, or profession, my heart had built a fortress around itself, making each elimination feel like a programmed routine. Every time, the inferno claimed them, the scent of gasoline acting as an unholy cleanser, ensuring their erasure. Over time, the land bore the scars of my actions, a grim reminder of my role. At the culmination of a half-decade, TJ graced me with his presence, laying forth the choice of extending my contract. His timing was impeccable. I had just mastered the art of crafting a delicious plate of fettuccine. My solitary confinement had ironically blossomed my latent talents, culinary skills, strumming melodies on a guitar, consuming literature, and even sculpting with a chainsaw. Except for the tasks mandated by two trees, my existence there had an odd sense of peacefulness. Yet, the looming question hung heavy. Can I genuinely walk away from this? TJ's reply carried a veiled threat, but also a promise of financial freedom and a lavish retirement. But freedom came with its shackles. Exercise caution with your words out in the world. It'd be truly unfortunate to have you recalled only to face your own successor. The promise of a secure future pulled me back in. It was a decision I'd soon come to regret. Several years later, a bone-chilling event shook my core. On a quiet night, deep into the witching hour, the alarm pierced the silence. A sleek town car arrived, but to my surprise, it wasn't TJ emerging from it. Instead, a man dressed in a flawless blue pinstriped suit, his hair impeccably slicked back, stood before me. No friendly wave, no familiar gestures. An eerie dread settled in as my hand involuntarily tightened around my weapon. Introducing himself as Stein, he brought forth his asset. A young figure, head encased in a heavy black hood, draped in tattered clothes that looked like they'd been discarded ages ago. Their distressed cries tore through the silent night. The usual routine commenced, with the asset being led to the by now infamous charred ground. But this time, I couldn't stand the suspense. I took the initiative to remove the hood, revealing a face that I hadn't expected. A young girl, no more than 10, her face marred with the trauma she'd endured. Chopped unevenly, her blonde hair seemed a cruel mockery, and her wounded face bore testament to the horrors she'd faced. Exasperated, my voice cracked as I confronted Stein. What twisted game is this? His casual demeanor was chilling. It's just another asset, Haas. TJ's echoing instructions, you handle these assets for us, lingered in the air, challenging my very essence. Stein's demand was clear and cold. Handle the asset. I shot back, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. This is an innocent child, a mere infant in the grand scheme of things. What on earth could she have possibly done to merit this? Stein's eyes remained emotionless, and his face as hardened as stone. Your role isn't to question, soldier. Either you terminate the asset, or you will be terminated. I was faced with a moral quandary, gazing at the young girl, witnessing the fear ripple through her every feature, her teardrops mixing with her blood. I couldn't stomach the thought of being the instrument of her demise. She wasn't like the countless others I had dealt with over the years. This was not a desperate adult, or a resolved elderly individual, or a person bearing the marks of a hard life. This was a child, innocent and vulnerable. Despite my stained history, I retained a semblance of moral grounding. No, I declared firmly. Stein seemed taken aback. What did you say? I reiterated, no. I will not take the life of a child. Do it yourself if you must. The immediate tension was palpable. The two henchmen accompanying Stein reached for their weapons, their intent unmistakably lethal. Memories flashed before me, taking me back to the day TJ first indoctrinated me. And the autumn leaves, once a symbol of nature's beauty, now threatened to be drenched with our blood. Stein's ultimatum was chilling. Kill the girl by the count of 3, or both of you face your doom. My heart raced. The ultimatum was rapidly approaching its finality. As he intoned, 1, the eerie sound of flesh tearing filled the air, followed by agonized screams. Opening my eyes, I found Stein desperately fleeing, the men who had once threatened me now lying lifeless, their throats ripped apart by some mysterious force. That force quickly revealed itself. The once frail girl had metamorphosed into a monstrous creature, adorned with razor-sharp, spider-like limbs. Her face had grotesquely split into two, forming a ghastly maw. I braced for my end, convinced she would turn her newfound powers upon me. But she instead disappeared into the forest's embrace, leaving me stunned and disoriented. Without a moment's hesitation, I too fled. Panic drove my footsteps as I imagined being hunted by either the girl's transformed form or Two Trees' sinister agents. Lost in the wilderness, without any means of communication or identification, I ruminated on whether the devices they gave us were their means to track our movements. In my frenzied escape, I stumbled upon a road, its reality confirmed by the blinding headlights of an approaching truck. The kind-hearted driver, after discerning my disheveled state, offered a ride to the nearest town. Here I am now, tucked away in a nondescript hotel, recounting this tale on an old lobby computer. By selling the only valuable I had, my gun, I managed to gather a meager sum with which I hoped to vanish into obscurity. By now, Two Trees must be aware of my absence. I remain uncertain of their assumptions regarding my fate. Regardless, it's the lurking presence of that transformed girl that truly terrifies me. If you chance upon a young girl with disheveled, dirty blonde hair, avoid her at all costs. Her motivations remain a mystery, whether she acts out of self-preservation or sheer malevolence. Lastly, should a representative of Two Trees approach you with a seemingly lucrative job offer, especially one related to Black Site 7, turn them down. The position, as I've learned the hard way, isn't remotely what it's made out to be.